A deep fracture in the Earth's crust slashes across 700 miles of California. The San Andreas Fault. It borders both San Francisco and Los Angeles and creates one of the world's most dangerous earthquake zones. Scientists are racing to find ways of predicting the next disastrous movement of the fault. When will the great earthquake strike California?
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
California is famous for its warm and sunny climate. Its diverse lifestyles and spectacular vistas are as varied as any other land on Earth. Much of California's rugged beauty derives from violent earth upheavals, the product of a phenomenon called faulting. Deep cracks or faults in the Earth's crust scar the state from one end to the other. Of these, the San Andreas Fault is the longest and most dangerous. At 6 a.m. on February 9th, 1971, Californians were jolted into awareness of the powerful forces that molded their state. A sudden earthquake just north of Los Angeles caused massive devastation. 50 people were killed in the collapse of 2 hospitals. Since the quake was of only moderate size, engineers were shocked by the heavy damage to supposedly earthquake-resistant buildings and freeways. The Richter magnitude was 6.6, releasing several hundred times less energy than the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Had the shaking continued for another few seconds, the San Fernando disaster would have been far worse. 2 dams holding 7 billion gallons of water threatened 80,000 sleeping people. When the dams began to collapse, only the abnormally low water level prevented catastrophe. Geologists soon pinpointed the quake on a minor branch of the San Andreas Fault. The main spine of the fault hadn't even moved. The San Andreas Fault system is part of a grid of faults, mountain chains, and trenches in the ocean floor. These features mark the boundaries between huge moving slabs of the Earth's crust called plates. Carrying continents and oceans with them, the plates float on a hot liquid layer of the planet. Along the fault in California, 2 plates slip and grind against each other due to movement deep within the Earth. Dr. Tim Hall has studied the San Andreas Fault for 15 years.
I visualize the San Andreas Fault as a 700-mile-long vertical curtain of clay that runs the length of California down to a depth of about 10 miles that separates 2 moving plates from each other, the American plate and the Pacific plate. In places along that clay boundary, the fault can move along year by year, and we call that creep. In other places along the fault, the rocks are stuck together, locked. A large amount of energy gets stored in these surface rocks, which is released periodically by sudden large earthquakes.
With its many branches, the San Andreas cuts a broad swath through California from San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose to Los Angeles. All are in fault zones. 15 million people are vulnerable. We shall travel along the fault seeing places where the danger is great and observing sites where crucial research is underway. The trip begins at Southern California's Salton Sea. Repeated fault movement has lifted and exposed the reddish band of rock. The twisted cliffs were gouged by the fault's immense power. Nearby, the San Andreas has made pockets of groundwater. Lines of palm trees and brush mark the fault's passage beneath the bleak sands. Outside Palm Springs, 2-mile-high mountains were thrust up by millions of years of fault movement. The fault skirts the Los Angeles basin. Its numerous sub-branches, including the one which shook San Fernando, threaten more than 10 million people. North of Los Angeles County, the fault carves a broad valley. Near Palmdale, Dr. Kerry Seed dug into the San Andreas and found a treasure trove of prehistoric earthquakes. Using carbon dating, each event is identified. The fault goes down through many distorted layers, which mark earthquakes going back to the time of Christ. The intervals between major quakes range from a maximum of 300 years to only half a century. The earthquake of 1857, largest ever recorded in Southern California, shows up as a sand blow, where sand and water spouted from the earth in an eerie fountain. Trees along the fault had their roots sheared during the quake, causing growth to slow abruptly at the 1857 ring. In 1975, researchers found that a broad area of desert along the fault had risen about 1 foot during the last 15 years. They began a massive survey program to monitor this Palmdale bulge. Survey teams worked their way tediously up from Los Angeles, measuring the land level. Ominously, part of the bulge recently subsided. This pattern of uplift and collapse also happened before the devastating Alaskan and Chilean earthquakes. In Southern California, the pattern occurred once before without an earthquake. Does the Palmdale bulge reflect a harmless cycle or warn of a major jolt on the San Andreas fault? North of Palmdale, geologists drilled deep into the fault zone to measure the stress on underground rock. In hope of finding a new way to forecast earthquakes, the researchers pumped water into the drill hole. They increase the pressure until the rock breaks. Knowing the natural strength of rock, they measure what added stress it is under from the earthquake fault. They have found that rock in the fault zone is cracked, water saturated, and close to the breaking point. Further north, the San Andreas cuts through hilly desert country. In the stark and desolate Carrizo Plain, fault features are clearer than anywhere else. Most ground movement here occurs during large earthquakes in jumps of several yards parallel to the fault. The last of these took place in 1857. The quakes also cause the ground to move vertically, forming ridges along the fault. Repeated slippage has diverted streams along the fault. According to carbon dating, this stream bed moved 125 meters in the last 3,400 years. The Pacific Plate slides northwest, averaging 2 inches a year. At this rate, In 5 million years, it will carry Los Angeles past the Carrizo Plain on its way to San Francisco. Midway between Los Angeles and San Francisco on the Pacific coast is the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. The facility was originally designed to withstand an earthquake on the San Andreas Fault of Richter magnitude 8.5. During construction, however, geologists discovered a nearby fault offshore, the Hosgri Fault. Ralph Vrana is a county environmental worker who lives near the site.
I'm opposed to the nuclear power plant at Diablo Canyon because there's an earthquake fault running 2.5 miles from the plant itself, and that fault happens to be 250 miles long, and it's a major earthquake fault in California. A very large earthquake in 1927 of magnitude 7.5 occurred on that fault. A magnitude 8 earthquake is also possible on the Hosgri Fault.
Earthquakes are...
Richard Davin represents the plant's owner, Pacific Gas and Electric.
There are earthquake faults around Diablo Canyon, of course. There's a San Andreas Fault 48 miles away, but there's a Hosgri Fault which is closer, and that's the one that's been of the major concern in the last several years. And as a result, it's been the most thoroughly investigated fault, probably in California outside of the San Andreas, and we have designed that plant to withstand the maximum earthquake that could ever be expected to occur on that fault.
Those of us who live close to the plant, or 7 miles away myself, or wonder whether we happen to be guinea pigs in this experiment or not.
People talk about earthquakes even bigger and bigger and bigger, the kind of earthquake that would split this containment structure in half. I think when we got that kind of an earthquake, we've reached the end of the world, because before that would happen, California would be in the ocean.
After the Hosgri Fault was found, PG&E strengthened the plant. The adequacy of their precautions is controversial. We're only beginning to understand the dynamics of earthquakes. Whether any possible ground shock could cause hazardous release of nuclear radiation remains unknown. Further north, the fault continues to pass through major population centers. A great earthquake would cause incalculable disaster. Is there a way to predict it? The little town of Hollister lies 80 miles south of San Francisco on the San Andreas Fault's Calaveras branch. August 6, 1979. The strongest earthquake since 1911. Sam Pintello was outside landscaping when it struck.
I stood here and you could look out over the hills. You could see the hills rolling into each other, you know, just like they're just sort of bending. The ground was moving, the house was moving. Everything was everything seems to be tilting, especially the hills tilting toward each other. And of course I could see the trees shimmering over here. I didn't know, it was just eerie.
The fault at Hollister isn't locked. Slow creep and small shakes tear the land beneath the center of town. Houses are twisted out of shape. Streets and curbs are cracked and broken. In this region of unusual activity, instruments monitor fault movement. Hillsides are dotted with reflectors for laser beams. A unique two-color system tracks deep earth movement across the fault. 4 months before the August quake, the ground began to creep. Movement lasted for 10 weeks, followed by a period of quiet. Then, the earthquake struck. It is hoped the laser will eventually provide a reliable way to forecast earthquakes. West of Hollister, the San Andreas Fault gouges a narrow valley. Geologist Tim Hall supervises excavation into the fault.
We're looking for a record of earthquakes in California before recorded history. And the way that we do that is look for layers that have been displaced by the San Andreas and attempt to date them. The goal of our study is to predict how often the San Andreas will move in the future.
On the northern San Andreas, the earliest known great earthquake occurred in 1838, only 68 years before the 1906 disaster. If such a small interval is typical, the next major shake may be overdue in the Bay Area. Slashing north along a chain of valleys and long, narrow lakes, the San Andreas Fault cuts the San Francisco Peninsula in two. On the shore of San Francisco Bay is Marine World, where studies of animal behavior may give warning of earthquakes to come. Peter Gross is director of land animals.
What we have here at Marine World is the entire collection of both land and sea animals being viewed on a daily basis by all the keepers and the trainers and the handlers. And what they're looking for is any kind of an unusual, sustained behavior that might show flight or fear, which we can then document as happening just before an earthquake. About a half hour before the big earthquake, these animals, which ordinarily mix together and peacefully coexist amongst themselves, all separated and went into their own species. The zebras all stayed together, the antelope all went to one area. They just didn't want to mix with each other during this period of unrest and fear. I think that the animals are a lot more in tune to nature's sounds than people are.
Trainer Paul Barkman recalls the morning before another earthquake.
And when we finally did get them out of the barn, we watered them down. They all refused to drink, and they refused to eat all day long. We have one lead elephant, Jenny. She's the oldest. And she was thumping the whole day long, and she was trumpeting, which she very seldom does. And the other elephants were answering her back, and they were just really hard to control the whole day until after 4 o'clock when the quake hit. Then they were fine.
Reports of strange animal behavior before earthquakes go back thousands of years. So far, however, it has proven difficult to use such information for reliable prediction. There is still no sure way to warn of an earthquake. On the western edge of San Francisco Bay, homes are often built on compacted landfill. This kind of land can amplify ground shaking up to 10 times and turn wet, sandy soil nearly to quicksand. Cracks up to 3 feet wide could split foundations and bring thousands of houses crashing down on their owners. On the east side of San Francisco Bay, the Hayward branch of the fault cuts through city after city. In 1836 and again in 1868, huge earthquakes here caused little damage because the area was barely inhabited. Today, however, dozens of schools and hospitals stand in the fault zone. In the aftermath of the San Fernando quake, where some buildings that met all earthquake codes collapsed, standards throughout the state were toughened. Schools along the Hayward Fault were reinforced or replaced. A dam, not unlike the ones that began collapsing at San Fernando, is being rebuilt. In Berkeley, the Hayward Fault rims the campus of the University of California. It runs beneath the football stadium, which is slowly being split in half. Dr. Bruce Bolt heads the university's seismographic station.
Well, according to the calculations that I have made, based on the work along the San Andreas Fault recently, the chances of a great earthquake affecting either the San Francisco area or the Los Angeles area in the next 10 years are about 50-50. If a great earthquake of magnitude 7 or 8 occurred in the Bay Area, undoubtedly there would be considerable loss of life. Most Californians are not well prepared for another great earthquake like that of 1906.
North of San Francisco, the San Andreas slices through Marin County. The little town of Olima straddles the fault. On April 18th, 1906, a giant tremor broke the earth. It shifted roads and fences an incredible 20 feet. Olimo was the epicenter for California's greatest earthquake disaster, known as the San Francisco earthquake. That quake claimed 700 lives. Today, the death toll from a major shock along the San Andreas could reach the tens of thousands. Only a few miles from the fault, San Francisco remains exquisitely vulnerable. Collapse of older buildings, showers of debris, and fire would inflict a heavy toll. In Southern California, stress has been building up on the main fissure of the San Andreas for more than 120 years. If the historic pattern is followed, the stress will be relieved by a cataclysm many times larger than the San Fernando earthquake. It is frightening to imagine that disaster multiplied 100-fold. Thousands dead, families homeless, firestorms raging out of control. 1906 type disaster would cause unimaginable chaos, but earthquakes recorded in Asia and Alaska dwarf any yet seen in California. Perhaps we have yet to learn the full power of the San Andreas Fault. The San Andreas is the most closely watched earthquake fault in the world. Hundreds of instruments monitor its slightest tremble. If it is possible, reliable earthquake forecasting belongs to the future. Earth science is only in its infancy. The forces that mold our planet and cause the ground to shake beneath our feet remain mysterious.